Good afternoon, everyone. This is Yasmin Taj from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting episode of our virtual panel discussion in partnership with Oracle on the topic career development in a new work environment, going beyond career ladders. So, what does professional growth look like in a post pandemic world? As careers took a backseat in view of business sustainability, there's a need to refocus attention on supporting development needs, and that means reviewing changing technology needs, rethinking experience, and equipping managers with the right resources and tools to hone their skills and areas of growth. Although career ladders for long guided career development, companies are realizing the power of career lattices and dual career paths. In this virtual panel discussion, we will take a deep dive into the changing learning mandate. Experts will reflect on how they are rethinking employee career journeys in the context of their industries, what has changed, and what is needed. This exclusive discussion is a part of the Oracle People Matters HR Reboot Week, the roadmap to reopening the workplace. And I take the pleasure to invite and introduce our speakers for today. First, we have with us Shishendu Mukherjee, Group Head Human Resources, Narayana Health. Shishendu is an experienced head of human resources with a demonstrated history of working in the food and beverages, technology, and manufacturing industries. Skilled in HR policy, sourcing, management, performance management, and employee relations, he's a strong human resources professional with a master's in science focused in applied and industrial psychology from University of Calcutta. Hi, Shishendu. Thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on this call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. S.V. Kiran, Senior Vice President and Head Human Resources, Apollo Hospitals, an admired HR strategist in Indian healthcare industry. Kiran is a technophile, change enabler, and a people leader. An alumni of Ford School of Management, New Delhi, he has spent nearly 2 decades exclusively in Indian healthcare sector and worked with corporate healthcare institutions like Fortis Healthcare Limited, Medanta, the Medicity, and Sakra World Hospital, Bangalore. Hi, Kiran. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Yasmin, for having me on this call.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And finally, we have with us Hardeep Singh, Head of Human Capital Management Application Strategy, Oracle India. Prior to joining Oracle, Hardeep was Vice President Consulting at Right Management, where he worked across Asia and Middle East with clients from diverse industries. Over the last 2 decades, he has been an entrepreneur, a student of human resources, and as a consultant to many Fortune 500 organizations on areas of talent management, organization design and development, employee experience, leadership development, succession planning, and career management. Thanks, Hardeep, for joining us today for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and pleasure to be here with Shishendu and Kiran. Thank you.
Yes, looking forward to a great conversation. Thank you so much. And our partner for today's session is Oracle. Oracle is one of the largest MNC employers in India and was among the first multinational software companies to set up base in India. India accounts for Oracle's largest research and development investment outside the US. In India, Oracle works with more than 15,000 customers across technology and applications and over 600 partners across the private, public, and government sectors. It employs over 38,000 professionals operating in various businesses. We have saved time for you to ask your questions at the end of the session. For those who are live, can simply submit or post your questions at any time during the session. We will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. So thank you once again to our speakers for joining us. We have an exciting topic to discuss, so let's hear it from our speakers. And I'll start with the first question, and this is to the entire panel here. There's been a renewed focus on career growth and development during the past year. How has career development changed as we navigate a new workplace environment where some jobs may be remote and employees may want greater flexibility? And I'd like to start with you, Dr. Kiran, if you'd like to start, please. I think you're having difficulty unmuting yourself, Dr. Kiran. Okay, so should we start with Shishendu? In the meanwhile, you can figure that out. Shishendu, if you could please. Yes.
I think Kiran's come online, so.
Yes.
Sorry for that. There's some technology issue. That's a very interesting question, Yasmin. And as we went through pandemic, and both Sushendu and I would agree that healthcare has been at the forefront, we suddenly felt a need to relocate our complete learning strategy. And it had to be done as of day before yesterday because we landed up into a pandemic over which none of us knew about it. So, and this was one place where classroom training or group training wasn't possible, group learning wasn't possible, and therefore one of the things that we had to quickly switch on was to technology. That was the only way we could reach our people because some of our managerial people were working offline. Nurses would stay in their hospitals and so on and so forth. And we had to teach the frontline workers about the do's and don'ts of COVID, what do you do, and so on and so forth. And then you had to continuously keep them upgraded in their knowledge, right? Because the COVID landscape was changing by the day. So the only way to reach out to them was the technology. So we had to quickly enable our learning with technology. Second thing was learning anywhere, right? That was very important because previously, when you are on the job or a couple of hours after the job, you will learn. From there, we reached a stage where you can even learn from the comfort of your bed, but then you need to learn, right? So we had to re-emphasize on the importance of learning, and this was an emphasis with even a survival instinct, right? Survival of humanity, survival of your own self, etc. Learning anywhere, going away from the classroom, right? Using technology for learning, as well as learning being continuous. So these are the 4-5 key changes that we had to bring about in no time to make the learning happen.
Great, I totally agree. I think one of the the healthcare sector had a very different impact to what other industries were facing due to the pandemic. They had to be on the ground also, and also at the same time reinvent themselves as to what was changing around. So thanks for sharing that, Kiran. So Shindu, I'll come to you on your views on how this entire landscape has evolved.
So, Yasmin, I'll sort of ask everybody to take a step back. Look at it from two perspectives. One perspective is the business. Okay, we keep saying the new landscape, the changed world. But if I ask you from a very pure business perspective, especially in the healthcare sector, what exactly has changed? I don't think too much has changed. Okay. The core of the business has not changed. What has changed is the way you deliver it. Okay. So what we were doing, we continue to do. The way we were doing it, we have to look at slightly alternative ways of doing that. There are words which we keep using about remote, flexibility. These are very key words which has come up in the last couple of last year one probably. But I was reflecting on this while Kiran was speaking. The opportunities of growth in a remote management situation, or let's say in a flexible world, was always there. You look at when people took a second career break. I mean, women usually would take a maternity break and come back, okay, or want to continue working from home. It's the same situation that there is today, right? Just that it's in a larger scale, and you have more people who are getting sort of on that bandwagon. So the challenge with the organization is, while the job has not changed, the delivery and the expectations of the job has not changed, how you get it done is what we have to address, and that's where career development comes in. Exactly what Kiran said, the operational piece about it. What we also went through was exactly the same. First there was this core fear about the COVID, the virus that was there, and the pandemic that was happening. Added to that, there was the lockdown. Added to that, there was the embargoes that the government said the private players cannot get involved in it. So for a period of 4-5 months, there was absolute zero business happening. And the fact is that this situation, this pandemic actually exposed one harsh truth, that irrespective of what we want to believe, our industry, which is the healthcare industry, is also susceptible to recessionary trends, and this has proved that. Okay. So now in that context, when you look at career development, okay, what do you see? You cannot have a classroom, but the person has to learn. So exactly what Kiran also has mentioned earlier, we had these small modules of videos which we created, and we put it out on a platform which we have. We use Microsoft, so we have something called Accelerate, which is there. Everybody uses it on their mobiles. The first things were about survival. So how do you handle a COVID positive patient? How do you use a PPE? Okay, it's as simple as that. Why do you need to use a face cover? How do you wash hands? What is the right method of washing your hands? These were modules which were created, snippets which were created and just pushed out, and everybody used that. Okay. Then we went one step further. We also did some clinical programs where the specialties like pulmonology and critical care, which were deeply entrenched and involved in COVID care, what would they get to know? I mean, you have only that many pulmonologists and you have only that many critical care specialists. Anesthetists who are pulled into looking after patients who are in the ICU. So how do they manage? That's how we evolved. So we use technology heavily in the sense that in a traditional manner, we would probably have put them all into a classroom and we would have asked them to sit and go through a session by an expert and then, but here, thanks to technology, we could do it overnight. But I still, park my thought that the fundamentals of the businesses has not changed. What has changed is the way it is being delivered. And I think your HR has to start thinking of it from that point of view, is when you're delivering it differently. How do you measure efficacy of it?
Very interesting thought. I think the way you said it was the way we do business, the fundamentals of business haven't changed, but how we do it, how we work has changed. And technology, I totally agree. It's so important to stay relevant in today's times, and technology plays a very critical role in helping everybody stay, upskill themselves, reskill themselves in whichever way. So thanks for sharing that, Shishendu. Great thoughts. Hardeep, what do you think? How has the entire landscape of career development evolved in this new year?
I think we have two very senior professionals from healthcare, and the healthcare industry has somewhere been ahead of the rest of the industries in many aspects. So when you look at private healthcare in India, there is a hybrid model already in place. We are beginning to talk about hybrid models where we have knowledge workers on gigs, and in many healthcare, in many top tier hospitals, super specialist doctors are also on a gig model. So it's something which has been well tested and established. Second, the piece around development. I don't know if a doctor who still doesn't. I don't know of any doctor who still doesn't study. So I've got a bunch of doctors at home in my family, and every year they have this tendency to go and continuously upskill themselves. So I think there is this piece around at the core, which Shendu was pointing out and what Dr. Kiran is saying, is at the core of what we are seeing in this pandemic, at least that the healthcare industry has, has been ahead of the curve. There are other limitations, or sure, for healthcare in terms of going purely digital. Like there are some enterprises on the planet today which are purely digital. They don't have a single employee. They don't have a single meeting room. They don't have a physical space. They don't have deadlines, and they're highly profitable. And they are increasing their profitability year on year. Imagine there is zero fixed cost. I shouldn't say zero fixed cost. There is fixed cost with regards to server spaces and all. But barring technology cost, employee cost and rental cost is zero. So I mean, that kind of a model, a completely virtual model, is hard to replicate, and that's an extreme example for in healthcare, or for that matter, most of our businesses as we see today. But the point I'm saying is, healthcare industry has certainly has shown us the way on how a blended workforce model can exist. Now, what the last year has done is that everybody's woken up to development. It's not just and those who haven't, they have to. I mean, there is no choice. There is an advent of newer skills coming up. The way, as both my colleagues on the panel are saying, the way of working is the way of execution is changing, and there's reason, and it's beginning to uncover new questions that how are you measuring efficacy, how are you measuring. So there are new skills being asked and demanded for. The beauty is that this is not just limited to individuals and employees. Organizations are waking up. They are looking at newer operating models. They are looking at how you could blend, how to define talent. Till about a bunch of years back, talent was defined as top employees of an organization. But today, talent, and especially for Shishendu and Kiran, talent would be even somebody who's on a gig with them, somebody who logs in about few days in a week with this specific hospital. And that kind of a philosophy is translating into other mainstream businesses. The third aspect, the third shift which I see, Yasmin, is on this entire piece on lecture based and audio visual based learning. So we had this classical model that people learn best by doing, and then there is an element of support and coaching given by the manager, and then there is this formal learning in terms of a content which a trainer would deliver, or in today's age, on a Zoom or a Teams or a online content would deliver. I think there is this case of leveraging employees as internal gigs which is beginning to take shape. More and more organizations realizing that you've got a workforce sitting internally and they have time on their hand, they have interests on their hand, they have passions on their hand, and how we can leverage that. So, for example, if I have passion for photography, can I raise my hand and do some promotional work for or create promotional materials for Oracle? Or if I have interests in project management, can I go and offer my hand? Or if I have interest in digital marketing and I want to learn it, how can I go and do a gig internally with another team within the organization? Now, what does this do? It saves you money. It helps the person develop. It's a live project that person is working on. And you're creating stronger organizations which are full of skills, are quick to learn, and of course, they're agile. So, I mean, that's the other shift which we see happening in the planet.
Very interesting. Thanks, Pradeep. Yes, I do agree. The renewed focus on career development and the kind of ideas that have come up because how organizations are reinventing their workforce structures, looking at gig workers, a hybrid structure. So that overall has changed the entire focus on learning and development and career development, actually. So thanks for sharing that. Dr. Kiran, I'm come to you again. So what are some key lessons from revamping your L&D strategies that you are going to implement as part of your career development roadmap?
Okay. Actually, this period has taught us a lot of things, and some of the things that we have learned are those which are going to be there for us for a long time, at least a decade or more. The learnings were that if you see traditionally healthcare, doctors are pretty good in terms of clinical updations. They attend CMEs, conferences, whatever. This is one situation where they have to learn beyond clinical, and beyond clinical could be how to do online consults, for example. Because healthcare wasn't used to do it, which means you need to learn technology. And we'll have doctors of all age groups. How do you bring in technology? Then second is how do you actually write notes when you're doing a online consult? How do you transmit this? How do you take care of the medical legal issues concerned with it? Right? What are the medical legal implications? I mean, I'm just taking one set of doctors to start with. So what we did is we said the only way we can be different, right, and still cater to our patients, because at the end of the day, as an organization, we are patient-centric and we do everything keeping patient as a center point, right, is basically to figure out the changing needs of the patient, adapt ourselves for that. And to do that, the only way is to learn. And therefore, we had to revamp our complete learning strategies. And when we were doing it, what we did is, as Hardeep brought it out, there's an organizational learning. That as an organization, we want to look at it differently. So which means right from the promoters to the key leadership levels to everybody else, they need to undergo a learning, and learning pertaining to change first, right? And change at that levels is not very, very common, right? So some of us senior leaders have started working on it in terms of training others in terms of change, etc., etc. So then one is an organizational change. One is a change on the ground, right? And when I talk of on the ground change, what we have done is we have classified this requirement of learning to different categories. And within a particular category of members, we call all our employees as members, we have reclassified into what are the learning needs at different levels. If I were to take a senior consultant, the requirement that we felt was more on the learning of technology, more on learning of the medical legal aspects of what they're doing now remotely, more on learning of accessing medical records, right, electronically, digitally, more on how do you use your phone to access some of these things, etc. Right? So what we have done is we have something called Medversity, Apollo Medversity and Apollo MedSkills. I don't know how many of you have actually heard about it. So we quickly roped in Apollo MedSkills and Medversity. Right? Medversity is an online training platform that we have. MedSkills is a skilling platform that we have. So we quickly roped in Medversity here. Develop certain modules which are very specific to these people, which will help them overcome these and made it available on different IT platforms that we had. As we develop this, now today we are at a stage and we are launching this in the first week of March. End to end, the senior most doctor, call it as a director or whatever, to your resident, we have developed very customized modules for these people, which can be learned anywhere. Even if you're in a flight, you can learn this offline. Do pre-test, post-test, do skilling, and therefore you can say, hey, this is what has happened. And some interesting thing that I'd like to mention here is when I look at my junior most doctor, apart from giving them modules of what helps them to deliver work, we also looked at what is their requirement of learning. And when we say what is their requirement of learning, okay, if I take a resident doctor, you need to know how to write notes, how do you check vitals, etc., etc. But at the same time, these are the set of people who are also preparing for their PG examinations. So what do? How do you help them for that? So I said, as a part of their overall learning, please keep some learning for their career, for their advancement. So we are almost in the process of tying up with Bhatias. Bhatias is a renowned career and coaching institution for PG entrance examinations in medical, wherein we provide online learning facilities for members who are aspiring for their PG or super specialization. So what typically happens is it's not just learning pertaining to your job, but learning pertaining to your career. So then what happens is the people are more engaged, and when I say engaged in a learning point of view, right? They see a point of why they should learn. Right? It's not that somebody called us and they said this is mandatory to learn. I didn't put any punitive actions as a part of my learning strategy. I only said it has to be a pull factor rather than a push factor. So you understand their needs, cater to their needs, so that they ask for more learning models. And trust me, this is actually working well with the junior doctors, and my attrition has come down, which is very interesting. Because during pandemic, I had this challenge of not getting resources even if I want to recruit. As Sindhu said, we had a huge shortage of some of the specialized areas like ICU doctors, pulmonologists, and others. So how do you get it? So I had my internal medicine doctors get in, anesthetists get in, right? Except probably for a couple of surgical specialties, everybody got into it, right? So how do you do this? So when we did this, we suddenly realized that while we were finding it difficult to recruit from outside, we could retain our talent. We did something similar with now nursing teams. We rolled out a volley of trainings which are very specific to their area of work. An OT nurse, an ICU nurse, a ward nurse, etc., etc. We had this tie with an institute called Dorsley in US. So we developed these modules and we gave these. And trust me, the satisfaction on the floor, they felt, hey, this is the time when the organization stood by us, taught us what is to be done this things. And once they underwent those modules, they asked for more. And today we are in the process of developing a 2-year learning modules for this nursing. Similarly, we have done it for paramedics, similarly, we have done it for admin, etc. So what has happened is, this period we have used to actually understand the ground level requirements of nursing. Came out of the traditional way of doing a training need analysis or training need identification by whatever traditional methods of doing it, and looked at it in a different way and created a plan and strategy to cater to it. So if you ask me for next year, am I doing a training need analysis? No. Am I doing training need identification? No. But what I'm doing is basically a thing wherein my employees come and ask me, hey, this is what we want to learn. And when I put it together across the Apollo system, don't believe we have come up with some beautiful modules and beautiful requirements. And therefore, we have literally turned the training upside down and the learning upside down, not just to upskill them, reskill them, but also actually make them relevant for today. One last point on this particular thing is that this is one time when healthcare was always seen as a very niche area, right? If you are a technician in cath lab, you are a technician in cath lab for life. Right? And so on and so forth. If you are an OD technician, you are an OD technician for life. This is one time that we saw, and this we saw not because we didn't want to employ people, but the resources or talent wasn't available, that you need to, multi-skill your talent, which is not very common, because there are specialized areas. And we had actually identified areas where you can multi-skill your people so that for them there is a career ladder beyond, or the career growth beyond what they are doing. So you don't have to retire as a technician or a nurse or whatever. You can do multiple other things, as well as it helps in terms of making your services faster and better for your patients. So these are some of the key things that we have done.
Very interesting initiatives, Kiran. I must say that, the fact that you're aligning the personal goals of your employees with the goals of the company and then making it a pull factor rather than a push factor, I think that really works really well when it comes to developing people in their roles and making it further there. So some great initiatives. Thanks for sharing that. Shishendo, before I come to you, I have a question from one of our audience members. Maybe I can ask that to the all our speakers here. So Sonam has asked, how do you make onboarding easy considering the work from home scenario and bringing people up to speed with the culture and environment of the company? So Shushendu, Dr. Kiran, Hardeep, anybody would like to answer that question?
Okay, let me share my experience
Sure.
on this. Actually, I remember the first onboarding that I have done virtually was in the month of May 2020. Right? That was just the onset of COVID. None of us really knew what was happening, when it will open up, etc. And I had this COO, Chief Operating Officer of one of my key verticals, who was based in Delhi, was to come to Chennai and join us, and then he couldn't. So what we have quickly done is, two things. So though we have a hospital in Delhi, International Hospital, but nobody could even go to the hospital, right? Because it was complete lockdown, right? And this guy is coming from allied health industry, not really hospitals. So what we had done is we had quickly created, digitized our joining forms, right? And actually made these digitized joining forms to him for joining formalities because we wanted to have our paperwork in place. I remember sending the required IT requirements like laptops, dongles, etc. in one of our cars, which obviously had an Apollo sticker so that the police doesn't stop. And trust me, we did his entire induction online, and that was the time when we have it with Microsoft. So we started using Microsoft Teams extensively, and this was the first online induction that we have done across the country because he has to meet all these new people. And at the end of the entire induction, the experience that he had was better than what it would have been in person. So right from your joining formalities till the time he's fully onboarded, he has become ready to start working. We had done online. He actually landed in Chennai 9 months after he joined us.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for sharing that and answering the question. Shushendu, I'll come to you now. So the healthcare sector had to navigate a difficult phase during the pandemic. They had to scale up their operations quickly, and many employees had to multi-skill. How has that experience changed your understanding of jobs in the future?
Okay. So first of all, let me look at it from the perspective of what we went through. Okay. During the COVID period, while because of COVID, the electives, which is core of our business, the larger multi-speciality, the business dropped completely because people would not come to you. Okay. But then the COVID business picked up significantly when we were allowed to service COVID as a service line. Okay, that picked up significantly. So what happened during that phase, and then gradually COVID started coming down, and people started coming in for the elective procedures as well. Okay, now that was a very critical period because every hospital has to take care of the patient, which is their primary target. But in this case, the patient is also a very sensitive state where they can transmit, an infection to your own staff. So not only are you responsible for looking at the safety of the patient, but you're also responsible for, the safety of your staff. So how do you manage that, and how did the jobs therefore become defined is one very big thing that we try to address, primarily in the nursing area. So nurses who took COVID duty, we could only deploy them for a specific period of time, and after that they would go on quarantine, self-quarantine. So we have to set up, places where they would quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. Now look at a hospital operation. A hospital operation works on a specified ratio between number of patients to the number of nurses that you have, and this is defined different for different wards or different specialties, different beds. That's how it is. Now, when you have, so therefore, you will not have a surplus of nurses. Unlike in the IT industry where you have a bench, you normally don't have a bench of nurses because nurses, unless they are deployed, they will quit and go. They're not going to sit and wait for you. Okay. So we had limited number of nurses who were getting deployed for, let's say, 14 days. But after that 14 days, I can't deploy them. They're on quarantine. So, and the patient is still there inside. Okay. So that became, and then this is one half of the business, which is only the COVID business. And the other half of the business, which is the non-COVID business, requires 24/7 supervision by nursing, which is specialized to that area. So here, of course, multi-skilling became extremely important. What we also did was, we thankfully, I mean, in our situation, we have a nursing college also. So they pitched in, the senior students from there pitched in, not as nurses but as support to the nurses. Because if you look at the nursing job, the bedside or the clinical job is the core job, but there are many other things, making the bed, indenting the medication, getting the food, all that stuff is there. So those could be done by somebody who's not a nurse. So not only did we get these nursing students, but we also had other people from administrations and front office and all these who pitched in to do that part of the job. Okay, so that's one part of the way we multi-skilled and changed the job profiles slightly. Now, as far as doctors are concerned, and I think Kiran has alluded to this already, we did start off on remote consulting, which was video consulting. Okay. But you know what, our learning, and this is from our sense, is that unlike in many other countries, in our setup, what happens is, if somebody is unwell, you go and catch hold of a person's hand. In a developed country, you have a system and you go to the system. Who is behind the system and actually giving you the treatment? You are not bothered by it because you are covered by 2-3 things. One is insurance. You are covered by it. You are covered by the norms and regulations, which are very structured, and you are covered by a legal system which will cover you. So these 3 things ensure that the quality of service that you get behind that wall is pretty much standardized. But that is not the case in our country. So anybody who's unwell will go and hold the person's hand who's a doctor, and the doctor becomes God, next to God. Okay. So remote consulting in our country, maybe we did have successes in the urban areas, but in semi-urban areas, forget the rural areas, in semi-urban areas, it did work. People would just put their relatives onto our Tata 407 and drive up to our, this is what it is, now you tell us what to do. Okay. So intervention of technology, while it is important, how are we penetrating those last mile? We talk about consulting on a phone. We still have a large portion of our people who still do not use a smartphone, who do not have a stable 3G connection. How will you have a video connectivity happening if you don't have a stable connection in that place? Okay. So from a doctor's point of view, that became a big challenge. Okay. And then because of travel restrictions, doctors were not allowed to travel between states. Okay. Lastly, the admin piece, which is the people who do the administrations. Okay. That is where the major churn in terms of multi-skilling actually happened. Because admin, first of all, they realize that, let's look at the job. Let's look at the front office manager. Okay. Now, if there is no patient coming to the hospital, what does the front office manager do? And second, you can't deliver a front office manager's job sitting out of home, remote working. Right? So therefore, those people came in handy in doing a lot of coordination work, getting patients. They almost were doing what then Kiran would understand, what we call, marketing, or a bridge between marketing, which is getting a patient to the hospital and then hand-holding the patient through the hospital, through the treatment, and then getting them out again. So multi-skilling becomes, in a hospital context, it depends on 2 things. One is how you are looking at the safety of these people. That is very, very critical. Okay. And the second is safety, and the safety of the patient also becomes. So there are 2 things which have to be managed in tandem in a hospital scenario. Okay. So my sense is that's how we managed multi-skilling and the jobs during this pandemic.
Thanks for sharing. They're very interesting. I love the fact about how people from the administration actually upskill themselves and help in other departments of the hospital. So very interesting, and the way your doctors upskill themselves to provide consulting online and all of that. So some great thoughts there. Thank you, Shishendu. Hadib, my question to you now is: in which areas? And Shishendu spoke a lot about technology, but he did raise a question on reaching the last mile. So, in which areas is technology enabling companies to outperform in the career development roadmap? And any examples that you would like to share there?
Yeah, and let me put that. Let me agree with Shishandu on the element of connectivity. So if we don't have a 3G, and Airtel's already tested 5G in Hyderabad, so if you don't have a specific spectrum or capability, bandwidth, and if you don't have connectivity, technology obviously is about augmenting that element, or augmenting once you have connectivity. So that point is absolutely there. But for a segment of the market in India, which is technologically, which is connected, uh, over there, there's tremendous possibility which technology is opening up. And and let's just look at career development. It's already a very complex subject. We are each of us has unique ambitions, aspirations, capabilities. Each of us have a certain set of beliefs, thoughts, a certain set of uh, a certain set of awareness of what we want to do. Now, imagine on this piece, we are adding not just a linear career progression, which is a functional of sorts, but we're adding multi-linears to it. So it's non-linear all of a sudden. So suddenly the complexity, if I was a HR architect, is far more for me. How do I really go ahead and look at mapping what the organization needs, what an employee aspires for, what a gig worker or a talent aspires for, map their skills. Firstly, do I know their skills? What level their skills are, what's the validation assessment of the skills, uh, what's my fitment just because I have an aspiration, would I be suitable for the job or for that assignment. All of these are extremely complex pieces. If I was to sit, if an HR architect was to sit down and design them. So what technology is doing is taking the grunge away out and making it extremely simple for a person. So much so that a person could talk to a digital assistant and say, "Hey, my interest is to do this job," or rather, "Can you help me identify what my talents are, what my strengths are, or what are some of the few jobs which are suitable to me?" So the technology at the back end can look at a personality profile, look at skills, look at feedbacks, populate all of that, and push back saying these are the one, two, three roles which you could perhaps look at internally in the organization. Also, the other element is uh, how technology can then look at saying that, okay, if you were to do this role, this is this chance of success for you, and similarly populate a similar insight to the hiring manager that if you were to hire Hardeep for this role, this is the kind of success and efficacy he will bring to the table. So there is this piece around making it easy, making it very simple for both employees and talent to interact with, uh, using elements of intelligence to create insights and predictability. And and I would say it's really about solving for the entire experience, making it simple, both for an employee and an architect and an HR architect. Uh, there is just tremendous piece around, and I keep going back to it, which is called the opportunity marketplace, on how you could, how organizations could offer gigs to their own sets of employees. And that's a platform where employees and talent can go in and select, hey, this is what I want to do. Uh, Even in that, technology can again further go into mapping, provide recommendations and fitments. So that's the other piece which technology can enable in terms of uh, adding spurs to the career development process, which are there currently.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Hadi. Very interesting thoughts on how technology can be used in different aspects of the career development roadmap that organizations are looking at. So, thanks for sharing that. Dr. Kiran, I'll come to you again. How are you thinking about the role of managers or teams or functional heads in enabling a continuous learning culture? And how are you equipping or supporting them?
Okay. That's an interesting question. I think the managers have a key role to play in the learning of their teams, whether it is direct administrative teams or the functional teams that they're leading. I personally believe that the culture of learning is primarily driven by the managers. Very often it's thought that the chief learning officer of the organization or probably somebody sitting on the top drives it. I always believe that this is driven by the managers and anything below that. When it comes to Apollo, this is something that we always thought, and therefore we created something called as Learning Saturdays because I insisted that I want right from my chairman to my all line managers, there should be a culture of learning. And if I have to make Apollo a learning organization in say a year and a half from now, I mean our target is March 22, then it has to start from the top. So we started this concept called Learning Saturdays, right? And this we are running it for the last month and a half very religiously. Is to take time out, right? And here, if you see, and this I have not involved the first level, right? Because that's where your whole thing starts slipping out. So I didn't involve a CFO or a president or a director, etc. I just took the number two levels and I created this forum of about 80 odd people. And we have speakers from within, whether it could be functional heads or leaders in a particular area, or we have speakers from outside. So what we do is that we are not teaching them here a area of work because that's something that is a functional thing or a department thing which we individuals do. We are teaching them here about a learning organization, the importance of learning, how this can actually be very, very relevant in a current situation, or the career lattices that we were talking about when we introduced the session. Today, the younger generation will not have the patience to wait for 3 years or 4 years to be eligible for a promotion, then they grow and so on and so forth. Today, nobody believes in that. And if you want to attract and retain talent of the level that you're looking at, I think the time has come to forget those ladders and work on lattices. And lattices is a very good word. You look at a horizontal, vertical, and diagonal way of moving, right? And parallel career paths. If you are talking of upskilling and reskilling, then parallel career paths are also really relevant, right? Or multi-skilling, especially leads to parallel career paths. Today, while you are trained, say, in a particular area, say if I take a managerial example, you may be specializing in HR or finance or IT, etc. But not necessarily that you will retire there and you can become a CEO or whatever, except for any statutory requirements of being a CFO if you are going to be something, etc. You can become anything. And if you see Apollo, its 37-year-old culture, we have front office assistants who have become unit heads or even chief operating officer for clusters. And we have traditionally done this, but those days probably it was done more based upon the individual perception of competency or the ability or skill rather than scientifically doing it. But today, right, the aspirations are high, the learning abilities are very high, the opportunities are very, very high. And therefore, we thought the only way to be ready for all these challenges is to actually empower, enable learning through the managers. So while Learning Saturday is one of the initiatives, this and as I said, this 1 hour on Saturday is taken out for learning of these set of people. We are consciously working on learning being an everyday activity. Post your dinner, you could take out half an hour's time. It could be anywhere, right? So everyday learning is something that we are putting in place. We are insisting with the managers to give time for learning because these managers who usually say, no, patient is important, patient is dying, how will I spare somebody for a training, right? So usually within healthcare, especially hospital, I would say, people think that they don't have time for learning, or many people think that they have learned already, so there's nothing much to learn, right? So the idea was to break these two barriers when it comes to managers or the line managers. And thirdly, we are talking about building a resilient and a learning and a growth mindset among people. Because when you are aspiring, then you are wanting to learn becomes very, very high. And the last one that we wanted to promote there, in fact we are promoting there, is community learning. And when we talk of community learning, we are talking about making the information available in different forums, in different websites, in different ways, so that if somebody's sitting on a table and they're having lunch together, then one of them breaks up this topic and they spend that half an hour of lunchtime discussing that topic. For example, that's what we call as community learning, right? So these are some of the ways in which we are actually promoting this at the line manager level and below.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing those initiatives, Dr. Kiran. I think, yes, managers play a very, very key role in creating that entire continuous learning culture and the kind of initiatives you spoke about and how you are helping them upskill themselves and making it an inclusive culture of learning with community learning also. I think that's a great initiative. So thanks for sharing that. Shishendra, I'll come to you with the next question, which is about self-learning. So as we move to an era where self-learning and self-discovery is going to be critical to an employee's career development path, how is the traditional role of L&D going to change?
So, Yasmin, if you look at the traditional role of learning and development, okay, the typical way of looking at learning and development is that there is an assessment done, there is a design which is created, and a delivery of a design which is called a solution. Okay. Now, all of this is based on an understanding that there is a gap. And that gap can be designed, or the gap can be defined based on the employee's capability, which essentially comes or stems on a bedrock saying, as an organization, I know, you don't. Okay. Now, as we are moving into this new era, not only in healthcare, but across all industries, people are far more self-aware, far more self-aware. I mean, when we were kids, I'll just take a minute off from this topic. When we were kids, when our parents were bringing us up, they would say, do this, don't do this. Okay. And we would follow. We would do what we were told and not do what we were not told. If we did not do that, we would be branded as bad boys or good boys. Typically that's how parenting has always been. It's been kind of polarized parenting. It's in that sense. Today, I try and tell that to my 8-year-old. She turns back and asks me why. I better have an answer for that why. Okay. So the question that comes is, if an 8-year-old can ask you a question why, when an employee is joining, why can't he or she can also has that exact same right to ask you why? And therefore, it is more important to understand learning and development from a point of view. What Kiran was also saying, that what does this individual want to be? Not what we were offering in terms of a traditional role of a career or a position, or it doesn't matter anymore. It's about capability. It's what you bring to the table. Okay, and how the organization is helping me to become stronger, better, to deliver what I am already bringing to the table. Can I expand that laterally? Can I grow it? So you cannot, when you are designing an L&D program, you cannot come at it saying that, there is a gap. So traditional L&D, let's call it, we usually used to call it the training need analysis, right? It would always be based on a template called PDP, which is personal development plan. What is the PDP? The PDP is a conversation with the manager who says, okay, this was your target. This is what you have achieved. This is what you did not achieve. Or in order for you to move to the next role, you need to do A, B, C, D, which means the manager knows, the employee doesn't know. That paradigm has to completely shift. And it has to be more of an open-ended conversation with the employee as to what they want. And it's not an employee, it's an individual, because you no longer can treat an employee as an employee. It's an individual who's come and is providing you a service. Now, within that scope of the service, how much of take back has he or she got in terms of the learning, and how much are you formalizing that in terms of your learning and development plan? That is what is more important as an organization for you to develop. We haven't yet reached that. Honestly speaking, we haven't reached that. That's a dream that I want to, somewhere get into that space. Okay. We have, however, started that in pockets with our medical fraternity, with our clinical fraternity, not the doctors, but the junior doctors, if you may. Okay. So what do you want to be? How do you want to grow? You might want to, do certain duties, not do certain duties. You might want to. Okay, I'll take another example. In my radiology department, we just had a conversation. In my radiology department, there are categories of work that happens within radiology, the ultrasound being one, all that stuff. So we opened it up and had a conversation with the entire set of all the radiologists we had in one of our hospitals and said, okay, how do you want it to pan out? What makes sense to you? Now there are women in that team who have small children and they cannot do night duty. Okay, you know what? As an organization, we would say, oh, if you can't do night duty, 2 years ago, if you did it, you can't do night duty, we will not give you a promotion, you're not good enough, the others are doing all that stuff. Today, when we had sat them all down and had this conversation, the men proffered to say, that's fine with me, I'll do more night duties, she can do more of the day duties. As long as everything is put in one order and there is fair recognition and share of rewards on that, we're good to go with it. So that's the thought process that needs to come into an organization where it is not about, I know how it is, and that is the only way that can happen. So completely revamp this approach to training and development by starting at the understanding of what you really need to do from a training need analysis point of view.
Absolutely agree. I think yesterday also we had a panel discussion, and one of the leaders said that it's about learning is about when the person wants to learn what, and understanding that from your employees, and not pushing it or entrusting it upon them. This is what they need to learn. That's the new shift that we are seeing in the entire L&D landscape. So thanks for sharing that, Shishendu. Hardeep, I come to you again. So companies are now moving beyond traditional career paths and rethinking of newer models of supporting their employee aspirations, whether that is dual career paths or career lattices. And Kiran also spoke a lot about how ladders aren't important anymore, lattices are more important. So what's technology role in supporting this mandate? So a flexible plan which supports employee development, upskilling, recognition in multiple directions and areas. So how can technology help in that?
Technology can help in three areas. Number one, it can help an individual.
A
Is it
little bit.
audible?
Yeah, now it's well.
Yeah. I was saying it can help in three areas. Number one, it helps in helping an individual identify what he or she wants to learn, upgrade, what's the direction of the career he or she wants to do. Second, it helps organization map the entire skills of an individual. Uh, Organizations even today struggle to have a skill mapping of the entire workforce, and it's not easy. I mean, what about my skills? What I had 20 years back, they're still with me, but I don't deploy them in my current job. There could be many other people who could have had skills in the past, but their current job, because they're not demonstrating those skills, the organization is not aware of them. So both demonstrable and non-demonstrated skills, how does the organization capture it? And thirdly, how does one leverage serendipity, the entire piece of moving from one assignment to another, capturing all of this and helping an individual chart his or her course? That's the other piece where technology helps. So far, like what Shishendu was saying, it was very hard coded. Now, when you look at a hard coding model, if somebody has a unique interest and if an individual interest that doesn't fit into a hard coding template, uh, the solution is suboptimal both for the employee and organization. So that's the piece where technology is coming in and solving for it. And like I mentioned, there is a bunch of stuff happening in terms of how organizations can use technology, which is conversational based, where there are platforms where you could host opportunities, where you can use, some simple tools around identifying what's best for an individual and an organization, and connecting all of this. The marketplace is fascinating. It's like an internal Naukri site where you could just post gigs and people can come and do that. So all the grunge work around it is what technology takes away to provide a seamless experience. And what Shishendu pointed out very beautifully is it's and Kiran is about the mindset. The technology is there, but it's the mindset which if you have to, it's not about controlling an employee. What he or she has to learn is about giving them the tools, the platforms, and then letting them run on their own.
Thanks for sharing that. Yes, I think it can really be an enabler. Technology can be an enabler of all the change that's coming across in the L&D and D and the career development path and the roadmap that organizations are thinking of. So, thanks for sharing these details, Hardeep. Before I move on to my last question for all my speakers today, I have one or two audience questions that I'd like to pose to you, and one is about performance management. And Sheetal has asked, with remote working, the ways of conventional performance management also need to change. So, can you share, what are the recent changes companies have made to performance management, and that in turn has encouraged career development across different segments of employees? So, Shishendu and Dr. Kiran, if you'd like to speak on that, please.
Okay, probably I'll take this first, and Kiran, please pitch in.
Yeah.
See, coming back, performance management has been based on a fundamental basis that if I see you in front of my eyes working, you are working. If you are able to define what you want in terms of the outcome from the job very clearly and link it to the largest cause of the other, the strategy, the larger outcome, because that becomes the crux. If you are able to do that for every single role and you cascade that, one major part of this performance triangle is taken care of. Okay. The second is giving the employee belongingness, a feeling of belongingness. It's not just that I have given you a job. Nobody does a job today. Okay, it's not that, it's not a 9 to 5 job. Everybody is involved where they are trying to create value. As an organization, as leadership, if you are able to make them understand the value that they are bringing to the table, that reinforces the first part, which is identifying the KRAs, if you may, in a very simplistic way, and aligning them with the organization. Okay. And the third part of this triangle is, what is a reward that makes sense? Please understand, it's not about benchmarking. It's about every individual. What is a reward that makes sense to that individual for that role that the person is doing to contribute towards the organization? If you have this triad in place and you are able to execute it properly, performance management can be managed in remote situations as well. And you have the other end of the spectrum. I have worked with large IT companies also, where performance management ultimately boils down to what famously has been known as the distribution curve. Okay, now distribution curve, I don't know. Today we have various views that the distribution curve has been done away with, the same companies which introduced them in India a long time back. Okay, and it has become a continuous assessment mechanism. It has become something where you are giving feedback on a regular basis. So my sense is we vacillate between two extremes. Either we do a distribution curve where once in a year you suddenly get to know that, oh, you are A, B, C, D, or E. Or will you go on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, you're getting a feedback, or you are doing this, which essentially means the manager is sitting on top of your shoulders and trying to guide you what you're doing. So instead of doing that, as I said, the triad, clearly define what is expected of that role, identify that role with the organization's larger cause, and link the outcome and the reward to it in a very meaningful way. And I think people are matured enough to understand this linkage and will be able to appreciate that the organization trusts me and in my capability and my ability to able to deliver.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Shishendu. Anything you'd like to add, Kiran, or should I move on to my next question in the interest of time?
So one point that I'd like to add is, I think Shishindu brought out it so beautifully. What I know, we are just actually in the process of doing this, and that's why I just thought it was relevant. Is that in hospitals is not so well defined. and therefore we are giving an attempt at Apollo to define this. Right? It's not so easy. So what we are doing is 2-3 things. One is that we are changing from KPI and KRA mode to OKR mode, objectives and key results, and making this OKR. I know Google does this well. Is into every 3 months or every quarter, right? So that you define this. And interestingly, I have deployed an agency which is doing it for it, and we use Oracle Fusion HCM. And the way goals work there, I'm just getting some of it modified there so that I can literally see these OKRs or OKs every quarter and evaluate on it, and that adding up to the final year's goal. In fact, just after this meeting, I have that 2-hour meeting with my implementation partner on that. That's something interesting.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So the final question in the interest of time, and it is about what is your one advice to companies thinking about redrawing their career development roadmap? And who'd like to take it? Hardeep, maybe you should go first this time.
I would say learn to earn to learn, and continuously do it every day, every moment.
Thank you so much, Hardeep. Yes, Shishendu.
Hey, I get asked this question quite a bit, but honestly speaking, I will take a page of Raju Hiranandani's famous movie, The Three Idiots, and that famous line, Kabul bano, kamyabi tumhare piche dhum daba kar bhagegi. It's exactly that. I mean, if you build your capability, success will come. Success and opportunities will both come. Focus on capability. The rest of it is more or less incidental. It will come.
Very beautifully put. Thank you, Shishendu. Yes, Dr. Kiran.
I would say, redefine your learning culture. Show the goal of the future. I mean, when I say goal, don't set goals for them. Show the future, right? So that they know where to look at. And the most important is, create a culture of learning engagement.
Absolutely agree with you. Thank you so much. I think yes, building capability, as Jishendu said, as Hardeep said, keep learning. Learning is all about growing in life. As Dr. Kiran, you said, that continuous learning engagement culture, that capability building culture that needs to be built. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'd once again like to thank you, Dr. Kiran, Jishendu, and Hardeep for great insight. It was a great session, a lot to learn from on how your organizations are looking at creating those career development roadmaps for your employees. Some very interesting new initiatives that have come up in the past 1 year. How important it is now to multi-scale, upskill, reskill people in these times, and how technology is helping them do that. So a great learning session for all of us. So thank you once again. And I'd also like to thank our partners Oracle and our speakers once again for the invaluable information and insights they've shared with us today. So with this, we had to wrap up today's session. This virtual discussion was a part of HR Reboot Week, the road back to reopening the workplace, brought to you by Oracle and People Matters, which is focused on building a resilient workplace. Follow our hashtag HR Reboot to get access to insights and experiences from the exclusive conversations we're having with a group of leaders who are leading the future of work. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Kiran, Shishendu, and Hardeep for joining us for this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.